As the only male in the parenting program at the alternative high school, Sam feels the other moms and school administrators display sexist attitudes towards him. He thinks strangers also treat him differently. Do you think he's treated unfairly, or is it all in his head? If the treatment is real, is it justified? Do any other characters in the novel experience sexism? What about ageism? Besides a specific answer. Blah, 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 blah. That. Yes.
I talked about how there were definitely like some specific cases where Sam was treated differently, like on page 24 when they let like Brianna walk through the metal detector after it had stopped him to check his car seat. But I think most of the time it was in Sam's head, and he was just thinking they were treating him differently because he was so self-conscious about his parenting compared to the other girls in his class.
I agree, like, partially on that. I do think Sam was treated unfairly, like I put on page 24 also, but also I think it was like page 30 when he was walking into the daycare and everybody was trying to tell him what to do. It just seemed like he was the only person getting told what to do and everybody else was just doing their own thing. He is like also like very like self-conscious, I think, and just and part of the justified part, I think there's just a stigma that like women are better parents than men at some points, and that's I think why some of them, and all the time it was women telling them what to do, so I think that's why like he felt like he was getting like not discriminated, but like it was not as, he wasn't treated as fairly as other people.
But at the same time, I feel like when you said on page, it was 25 where he walks into the daycare center and all the girls are like saying like, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I feel like part of the thing is that the girls in here, like we see like Brianna on the page before and her kid is 2. And so there's some of these girls might have like older kids, and so they've had like longer time periods, and so maybe that's why they're considering themselves able to give advice. It's like, I've been through this, I know what you've been through. So I feel like it's definitely much more in his head, just because they probably have had some of these girls have had more experience. Not all of them, but some of them have had more experience, and so as a result, they may think, oh, I'm able to tell you like this might be wrong, that might be wrong with Max.
I would say that it's somewhere in between the two, where like I think that there are definitely moments in the book that there is definite like, oh, you're a young guy, so you obviously like you made a mistake, you know, like you made a mistake in making this child, and like I don't know, I feel like the source that I wrote was page 9, and how he was talking about in the store. Like the grocery store that he went into, his insecurity of being a young dad, and I think that his insecurity isn't necessarily like unjust, I guess. You know, like he has a whole bunch of examples that have happened to him like in the past of like sexism and ageism towards him being a young father that really do like affect his, I guess, confidence in being such a young dad today.
I said the same thing. I think he's kind of ashamed of being like a teen dad, and like he's just like scared of what people would think if they find out he's like a teen dad. And I cited chapter 2, page 10, when the woman asked him if he's helping his mom, and he nodded and he said yeah. And I think it's all in his mind, and just like being able like to tell people, like he's just scared of being like how people would treat him like if they find out he's a teen dad.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I feel like it's also like kind of more in his head too. Like he takes it to more of a personal level than it should be. Kind of like how he thinks he's a bad dad to Sam or to Max, and we all think like he's not like that bad of a dad, but he just puts it on himself that he's such a big disappointment. And then there's also ageism, like when they were at the hospital and he saw the other boy and his mom running, and like they let the mom go with him into the hospital, but then they said that he could just wait in the waiting room for Max.
I said the same thing, that he always felt uncomfortable with Max. He was the one who was feeling like everyone treating him differently, and that in chapter 17, page 177, when he said finally that he was the father, but nurse didn't say anything. She didn't even give any look, which shows that people didn't treat him differently. It was all in his mind.
I think that besides like Sam being a father, I think that everywhere he goes, like someone's gonna make a remark, whether they're just like they notice Sam or whether they notice Max or not. There's gonna be some remark or someone that makes a face that like figures out that he's the father. Like there's no hiding reality when he is the father and that he's responsible of Max.
Yeah, a perfect example of that is on page 95 when they're at the bird food stand, and like the old lady gives him that kind of like oh, like that kind of look, and he doesn't. That's the kind of reaction he doesn't want to like get. He doesn't want to feel like he's being targeted. Like he was absolutely okay, just being the babysitter, just moving on, just doing their thing, and then Claire like continued it, and that's when he felt like really terrified basically, and that's probably why he like tries to avoid public interactions with Max or tries to not like make it obvious.
He's very insecure about when it comes to like Max in public. It's kind of it's like looking on it from like an outside perspective, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, so what? People are gonna judge you. They're gonna judge you for being a teenage boy even. And I think having become Max's, like having taken responsibility for caring for Max, not necessarily just being a father. I think if Max had been adopted away in the beginning, we wouldn't have seen much of a change in his personality. But I think just having Max around makes him very insecure. Like when we see him later in the book, I don't know the exact page, playing with basketball with Andy, he kind of reverts back into a like probably what his old self was, where he's much more confident and outgoing. And I feel like having Max, he's so scared and insecure about public opinions that he has to like retreat back into this like persona that's really not himself.
With the example that you were talking about, I was kind of wondering, would you say, I don't know, I guess trying to like phrase it. Why would you think, I guess, this is a question for everybody, would having the old lady giving like that little sneer, why do you think it affects Sam more than it affects Claire?
I think that Claire is probably, it seems like she's more confident or even like proud of having Emily with her.
Why?
I think that like even though like she doesn't always like appreciate it or like doesn't want it, I guess, she has more support at home, and so like she can know that Emily's being taken care of and by someone at least, and like I think probably like going back to the sexism thing, like she feels like she's not as different as like Sam does, because like there's more moms at the school than like obviously than dads, so like she fits in more there than like Sam would.
And also,
Oh, sorry.
Go. Okay, and also Sam's a little bit more comfortable with it because, or not as comfortable with it, because like his dad, you can kind of tell he's like not disappointed, but like when he said like you have to think about it, like you can tell he's not like totally comfortable with his son having a kid. But then like Claire's family, like they're okay with it, where like they'll like take care and like help, and they don't really say like things like you made a bad choice, where like that's what Sam's dad does.
Would you guys think that, I guess
I just want to like go back to your point about how Sam like feels like insecure and like how it's kind of sad, but I kind of disagree on that, because I feel like there is a lot of people like judging you as like just a person in general, and then to have a baby on top of that, I think it is justified for him to be like kind of not like, I feel like he's proud of Max, but in public I feel like it's justified to be like, yeah, like I made a mistake, I messed up, and I don't really want to like show that to the public because I want to hold a reputation. And there's a stigma that if you have a baby with you and you're like 17, that you probably screwed up. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't say he screwed up because he was just like living life. He just was he wasn't careful and wasn't attentive, but he also doesn't want to ruin his whole reputation within the community. So it seems like throughout the book that it's a very small community, and he's just like going to his house, going to school, coming back. he's not like adventuring out, so I feel like everybody knows everybody, and that's why he's very closed doors about him having his kid, and I'm just a brother, I'm the babysitter.
I agree with you, but I'm gonna make the point that it's not, I don't think it's a small community. They mentioned like back in the beginning of the book, they mentioned the metal detectors, and they say they're supposed to rotate between like all the high schools and stuff like that in the district, and that, like, when we first read the book, that stuck out to me, because it's like, how many high schools are there?
And you mentioned middle schools, like
Okay. Because it sounded like they mentioned like there was a lot more like high schools, but even if there's multiple middle schools, it's probably a community at least as big as Plymouth. I don't know everybody in Plymouth.
Well, I'm just
So.
saying, like, within
I
his,
see your point,
within his
it's like he
area
might know
of him,
people.
what he's doing.
I see your point, but like I don't think it's that small of a community.
I
So.
totally agree with Adam on that though, because like people's first impression, like if you're trying to like maintain like your social status or whatever, and like people see that you're the kid, like their first impression is going to be a lot different than if you don't have a kid with you if you're that young. So they might view you different based on like if your kid's with you.
Yeah, even like a personal example of this, like when I nanny in the summer, I have like a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old kid, and like people just assume that I'm not their parent because I don't look that old, and so I'm guessing that Sam just doesn't like getting that feeling like at the hospital when the nurse asked him if she was his, he was Max's brother or something like that. He doesn't like getting those looks and those feelings when really he's Max's parent. He doesn't want to go through explaining it to everyone.
I feel like going off of Sarah's point of Sam being insecure about having Max, like when they went to the mall, they got so many looks from like Andy and Jenny, kind of like they understood, but they still kind of made a look. But if it's two high schoolers just kind of hanging out, like they might be dating, whatever, but then when you have two such like young infants and then you have a high schooler, like people assume that you are the parent.
I think Sam is really unfair because he is a teenage, and then like people like they say, oh, that kid doesn't have a mom, so like they say, oh, he doesn't take care of him, like other the teachers or like the other moms, they tell him, hey, did you get the diapers, or like did you forget his bottle? I think that he wasn't following his mind, and he was not treated the way other moms are treated at school. Like no one asked Claire like if she get the diaper, but like Sam's, like they ask him, hey, did you do this for Max today? But like they didn't trust him. Like they didn't think he could do it actually all by himself without the help of a mom.
Alright, question number 2.